Just while we wait, if I just cover some housekeeping very quickly. So as you'll probably be aware, your camera and video will be turned off. But we do have both the chat function, which you can talk to each other, talk to us, and the Q&A button, which is for questions. So we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar, which you can feel free to type any questions on the material that we're talking about today, or any other burning land app questions that we have going forward. So please do use the chat and the Q&A functions if you have something to add, which will be very much appreciated. And Harrison, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Harrison. I work with CLM, who are a sort of consultancy down based in Sussex, and we work primarily on stewardship and BPS. That's sort of our main bread and butter, and has been in the past. And sort of more recently been engaged with farmer clusters. Currently manage 4 sort of in and around the southeast and South Downs, and even more recently sort of been working on things like biodiversity net gain and testing trials related to elms and the like, and sort of through a lot of that work have been getting involved with more landscape scale projects and mapping work and things like that, which is how we've got to use the land app quite a lot in the last 2 years. So yeah, that's mostly what we do.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Harrison. I also note a few more people are still joining, so hopefully you can see the contents on the screen, and just to reiterate, join with Harrison and Tristan here today. So we're going to be going through the Collaboration 101 on the land app, which should take us 15 or so minutes. I'm sure lots of you will be familiar with some of these if you're regular users. Perhaps a few new faces will learn a thing or two with our sharing settings. We'll be looking again at map of maps. Harrison, I'm sure you're very familiar with creating these kind of landscape projects and trying to get farmers, convince them to come over to the world of digital mapping. So I have a few questions for you along the way. We'll be uploading some documents, photos showing you how to do that. And then we'll have a little chat about data security as well, because I know that for a lot of landowners and land managers, that's right at the top of their mind when they are using these collaboration functions. Then tentatively, me and Harrison are going to try a live collaboration demo. So I'll be adding Harrison to the map as a collaborator, and we're going to work through a countryside stewardship, which I know probably some of you won't want to hear the phrase countryside stewardship at the moment, but we'll get some mapping done and work on that and see how that goes. And finally into an audience Q&A as well at the end there, where any questions you might have on the product or on collaboration, we'll get to. Okay, so let's kick off. If I minimize this and head over to my land app screen, just let me know, can you see my land app? Perfect, thumbs up from Harrison, thank you very much. So the first thing that I want to point out is that every single map that you create, every single project has its associated hyperlink. So if you want to add people to the map, if you want people to view the map, then each map has its own hot link here. So some of the main features that we're going to be discussing are up here in the top right hand corner of your land app map, and they're the sharing settings. So once I click this little person, I like to call it the little head and shoulders with the plus next to it, you'll notice that every single map has this top hyperlink here. So we want to send this in an email, we want to send this to colleagues internally, then it's just worth being aware. I know sometimes it gets missed over there. You can just copy and paste this straight into there. But what you'll see next to that link is that it notes that it's only accessible by collaborators. So this brings us on to some of the one of the most important land app collaboration features, which is adding collaborators. So you'll notice here that the current collaborators is just myself. I just created this map half an hour ago, and you can see that I am the creator. And it's important, that little creator annotation, because that person is the one that is responsible for owning and creating that data. So I have full ownership of the data within this map. However, what I want to do I've created my ownership boundary. I've imported some of my OS master map data, but now I want to bring in someone, an ecologist, a Harrison figure, to come in and review my maps, to add to my maps, as many of our users do. So what I can do is I can add an email address in here. So Harrison, tell me if I'm getting this right. I think I'm some dashes, aren't I?
Yeah.
Here.
Oh yeah.
CLM.co.uk. So all you need is an email address, and you are going to select, Harrison, a specific permission type. So we have 3 permission types on the Land app. The first being read-only. So this enables you to have a little bit more control over what people are seeing on your Land app maps. If you select the read-only feature, then Harrison, you could come into my map, you could have a look at the projects I'd been making, but you couldn't edit or add your stamp on any of those maps. You couldn't use any of the annotation tools or create any of your own projects, for example. So to do that, what I want to do is switch from the read-only to the editor button, which is going to give you a bit more control and is going to allow you to add and curate your own maps within this project. The third one is the publisher button. So this gives even more control, and this is actually going to allow Harrison to publish to his own organization. So it's really important that we're distinguishing between the 3, because you want to make sure you're in control of that data that you're creating. Sometimes you can have sensitive scheme applications, or you can have your SBI number in there. So just making sure that you're in control of who can see what and what they can do with that information is really important within the digital mapping space. So Harrison, I'm going to give you editor permission.
Just quickly on the email, I think if you do lowercase h, just in case, because I think it might be a little case sensitive. So
hopefully this comes through for our live demo later on, but I'm going to add you as a viewer, and you're going to have editor permission there. So you'll notice that now we have 2 collaborators on this map, and at any point, if I think Harrison oversteps the mark, or I don't want him to be able to edit anymore, I can just change that setting at a later date, which is really important. So I could also come in and I can send you a link to this map, Harrison. If you've lost that email, deleted it by accident, that's also available. On the subject of hyperlinks, it's also really important to know that we can specify what someone is looking at. So we're looking at Tim, our founder's farm, which is just a little land area in the Surrey Hills, just southwest of Godalming, which hopefully a lot of you are familiar with this shape now, after looking at it for every single webinar for those of you that join us regularly. But some people out there will have large farms, large land areas. Harrison, I'm sure you're aware, working on some of these big facilitator projects, that the areas that you can be working on are really large. So if you're a landowner that wants to specifically ask a question about one parcel or get their consultant's advice on one specific area, then the way we would do that is by having a hyperlink attached to each individual land parcel. And I really wanted to include this today because I was speaking to a couple of people earlier this week that were saying, how do I specify? How do I make sure I'm, without saying that big field to the left, how are we really classifying, clarifying exactly where someone is looking? So each of these parcels has its own copyable link in here. So all you have to do is tap once and you'll get the little message that says, tick, this parcel has been copied. And now when you come into a new tab, paste that link in, you'll be zoomed into that specific land parcel like that. And luckily my internet's holding out enough to have done that pretty quickly. So we'll just go over that process again. Let's take a land area down here. I can copy that link there and then paste it into my tab. And Harrison, you can do this as well now that you have that permission setting added. But we can now talk specifically about that land parcel, which is really useful. And Harrison, I guess my first question over to you at this point, working on these projects, working on the Land app, with various different clients, how are you kind of using these features? How are you adding people to the maps? Are people worried about that data being shared beyond their control? Please, take it away.
Yeah, well, so I think the data control element, that was a big comfort, certainly with going into a larger scale project, because you're right, I think that's definitely a point of concern, because you know, you're concerned about, particularly with various rules and regulations around land management, who's going to be accessing your data and why. So I think that there's that sort of ownership, and I guess it's in the Land Act terms and conditions quite early on, was a useful piece of information to have, to be able to say, look, this is your data as you create it. And I think, yeah, we're using it quite a lot for stewardship. It's been brilliant for stewardship, pulling in the RPA data and allowing for that. And I actually hadn't realized the hyperlink option for the parcels. It's really good, because, as you say, you might be trying to figure out which ABA strip you're talking about. So it's ideal for zooming in there and talking about exactly which one you're after. Out of interest, is it just the parcel that you can send a hyperlink to, or could it be sort of sub bits within a parcel?
No, that's a very good question. So, for example, just displayed that with polygons, but we can also do exactly the same with points and lines as well.
Oh, okay.
So you could even send a hyperlink discussing a specific tree in a specific field. So again, just a demo, just drop that little point, and that point has its own hyperlink, which will generate as well. And we can paste that in there, and we'll zoom into that, highlighted that specific point as well. It's a really good point.
Because I think some of the things we do as well are sort of ecology based, and particularly with things like what they call land management plans, and more the habitat creation plans. That sort of fine detail is often needed to identify where things are going, and making sure to talk about the right one, I think. That's where we've been looking at it mostly.
It's hard when you're on Zoom and you're on email to kind of, I mean, I know I'll sit with people and they'll say, oh, that way, or this way, and it's really difficult when you can't just point on on a kitchen table map. So
field names as well is a difficulty as well, because obviously we've got the field reference number, but obviously each farm has all the relevant field names, and I'm not as well versed on those as the farmers are.
Yeah, and we've just got a question I've seen coming in from Martin. Hi Martin, hope you're well. Saying, can you hyperlink a photo? And yes, you can. We'll be getting onto that in the next couple of minutes. So yeah, thank you for the prompt there. So moving on, while we're on that kind of document level, the other thing that's worth saying, to increase communication, to help people understand exactly what's going on while we're working in this kind of digital world, the Land Act parcels, points and lines all also have an associated attachment document section. So when we click on this specific parcel, you'll notice that we have two tabs on this right-hand panel, one being general and one being documents. And I know when you're trying to organize projects, you have spreadsheets, you have Google Docs all over the place. It's really nice to be able to gather them and put them all into one location. So what you can do, just like when we copied the link, all we have to do is press the new document button here in the bottom of this right-hand panel. And we're going to be asked to put in a document name, and we're going to have a link to that document. Now, it's worth saying it's not every document. To keep the software light, to keep your computers running at an adequate standard, it's only documents that are available and are cloud-based. So, for example, Google Documents will work, Google Slides, Google Sheets, for example, they'll work. Whereas if you have a Word document, you can't upload that to the Land App at this time. So just to demo that, let's say, for example, I just created this document just before we started. This just, a lot of people use it for kind of land surveys, or if they've had volunteers going around spotting wildlife. It's really nice to keep an accurate track record of exactly what they've been recording. So I can put in the name, just a bit of a habitat pre-assessment. And then what I can do is I can steal the link from this Norney Farm document, and I can pop it just in there. And once we've posted that link, you can press Save New Document, and that will add a hyperlink into each individual land parcel. So we've added Harrison. Harrison comes in. he can check, okay, there's a document attached to here, which is going to give me all the information about that specific land parcel, which is really useful if you're trying to, you know, coordinate remotely. The second thing you do, Martin, getting onto your question, is uploading photographs and referencing those photographs. So what I'm going to do for this one, and what I also really recommend for people creating land app projects out there, I really recommend creating a separate photograph layer rather than putting it, for example, on the ownership boundary layer or putting it on your OS master map area. The reason I state this is if we were to run a report on one of these, you would then get slightly more data because your photograph would be attached to that. So it's nice and easier to keep them segregated. So what I'm going to do is I'm create a new layer, and I'm just going to call that blank. I can press these 3 vertical dots and rename that. And I'm just going to call this one photo evidencing. And what we're doing there is we're just really splitting and dividing that data so that we're not getting too confused. So what we can do is we can go to the 3 vertical dots and we can press upload a photo here. And you can do that on any of our data layers on this left-hand side. So here's one that I prepared earlier. As long as it's a JPEG, a PNG, you can drag and drop that in. That'll upload, and then it will drop within the exact, I think it's 7.5 meters of where it was taken. It can drop in there, so you can get it pretty accurate. So just to show you, if I turn off and turn on my Bing imagery, you'll notice this track going down the right-hand side, and we can see exactly what that looks like on Tim's land. You can see the A3 roaring away there in the background, and then your advisor or someone else looking at that map can then come and download that photo, whether you're evidencing for countryside stewardship or you're creating habitat assessments that you want your ecologist to look at pre-site visit, and that's really useful. And Martin, finally, to your question, the photograph as well has that copy link ability. So you can copy that, pop it in an email, say, look how well my new tree that I planted is growing. It'll zoom you into that photograph and highlight that photo there as well. And then you could add, as we did before, any document to that specific photograph as well. And I guess passing the baton back to you, Harrison, about how useful, if at all, you've been finding, or have you been adding any documents, any photographs moving forward with some of the projects you're working on? How is kind of evidencing being shaping up? How are people required to kind of display that data?
Yeah, certainly with the photos, it's been quite good for particularly needing to evidence things like capital items in stewardship, because it's something you can actually send to the RPA. Admittedly, they would probably not access the electronic version, but even if it's just a download the photos, you know where it is, and then you can just label them and send them a hard copy, and they know where it's being taken from.
Sure. Yeah.
And from a documents perspective, it's as you sort of gave an example there for if you wanted to add a little bit of extra information about things like things that aren't referred to as much, it seems, with incoming private schemes, but sort of habitat surveys, species surveys, but even actually stewardship options. So Excel tables and things like that for different options and getting areas and that sort of slightly more detail on that. No, I guess that does that as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. Moving on to another question is a bit more of a general one, just mainly piquing my own interest, really. But the people that you're working with, you know, it must be a total mix of kind of people with digital experience, people that have never really used mapping online before, just been doing paper maps, and then maybe some people that are kind of more familiar with some of the systems out there. And I just wondered, for the participants here, if you had any kind of advice for either running projects or being part of a digital project, how people that you work with kind of find those kind of projects.
Yeah, I think I think maps are wonderful tools at getting across a lot of information. I think they're also just quite, you know, aesthetically pleasing to look at. But I think the digital element is slow in probably developing. I think, as you say, different people with it who we're working with have different views on it. You know, even within farms, certain members of a farm will be keen to engage with mapping tools and actually want to start working on them. So for example, stewardship this year, we did a whole process where often we create the maps, go to the farm, and we might have our laptop with us and actually start doing the work. And this year I've actually seen some people, we've shared the maps with them, and they actually reduced sort of the time spent on applications, just because they're able to get across their what they want or where they want it on their maps, or at least see where they might tell us and we can then add it. Because I still think that the advisory role is quite important, just because we're using this day in, day out, and so we're gonna have a bit more experience in terms of how to use it. But it has been really good at being a visual tool, and also being a sort of pins on a map tool for people to have to hand.
Yeah.
And I think that also some of the functions, as you say, editor, viewer, but also that lock function on the map itself to stop people editing too much.
Yeah.
So if you spent hours doing a draft stewardship map, that's quite ideal to direct people to the one you want them to edit, and not potentially edit hours and hours of work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. So when I lock this project, you'll see it turns green, which signifies that it's locked, as well as that padlock just closing. And you'll notice I'm not able, I can click on these static parcels, gives me a little bit of information. I can view the document, this one that I uploaded here, but at this stage I couldn't make any edits. So you're always, the creator of that project can decide who has that permission to unlock and lock. Yeah, it's a really good point, Harrison. One more question, if that's okay, in this part.
Sure.
You're involved with more facilitation funds than I've had hot meals, probably. And I wonder if you could just outline, moving forward with a lot of the government subsidies that will be coming out over the next few years based on working collaboratively in a landscape. I wondered if you could talk a bit on that kind of demand for moving forward with collaboration, and how you see that taking place, how people can get in a position where they're more able to join those groups or actively participate in facilitation funds. That would be really useful.
Sure. Yeah. So a colleague of mine is on this talk at the moment. She put in an application for us to do sort of mapping work with one of the farmer clusters we work with, and that's been really good, because I think everyone appreciates the need for a landscape scale look, at least, even if it's not yet implementing of a scheme, but certainly just identifying what's there, even if a sort of a high level overview, but also seeing how it fits together. So I think that's becoming more apparent in people's minds, but certainly with things like and it's something that we'd like to do with other farmer clusters that we work with, and also to engage with existing projects that are going on, to sort of that pooling of resources, not sort of reinventing the wheel where someone might also be doing it. And I think that that element of collaboration and where people are happy to sharing the data is really helpful, because it just sort of allows that layering up of information in your land. So when you want to come to access new schemes, you have reasonable confidence in what you're presenting. But certainly so we're involved with this test and trial at the moment, particularly looking at the landscape recovery element of Elm, and that element of collaboration is huge. I mean, it seems obvious in hindsight. When we went into it, we were sort of like, okay, people want to know what's the payment, what's the legal requirements, but actually, initially it was actually, what are you all doing? What would you like to do? And how would that work across the landscape? And sort of being able to represent that, sort of find those links, really helps in the creation and delivery going forward. It's sort of almost before getting the sort of more detailed baseline data, just sort of sets the scene, and then ongoing collaboration, of course, is very important before actually signing on the dotted line for an agreement, I think, or will be when we find out more information.
And so in an ideal world going forward with some of these projects, what can, and I guess as well as yourself, Harrison, open this up to the people watching and listening, what can we do to better facilitate your role, and what do you think people would most like to see next within the digital mapping collaboration space? I
think with the mapping, some people, as you say, different levels of comfort with it. A lot of people are using cropping map, sort of different mapping tools for cropping, and actually that works quite well. We've transferred a few bits of data across, but potentially where you're not, as we are now on a call together, maybe the ability to leave directions and stuff like that on a map, which I guess you can do in the form of arrows and things like that, but maybe not so permanent on the map. More sort of like as you were, like a comment section on a Word document, or what do they call it? Review section on a Word document, would be quite interesting. And what else would that be? I think it comes down to maybe you making people comfortable with the mapping, sort of showing them that it's a tool that they can access reasonably easily, but also something that they can leave to others who they're working with. But nevertheless, I think people often do quite like that. It is actually quite a simple tool to use, particularly in comparison to things like GS. Well, I think in QGIS, that's the one. It is quite an easy functional tool that is in many ways is quite similar to what you'd see on the RPA website, which a lot of people are familiar with in doing their BPS. It's just a slightly more editable tool. Probably think more.
It's good to have you here, Harrison, because we're so busy making the product, and we're so wrapped up in kind of what's next, that it's really important that we have as much feedback from people actually using the tool, just saying, hey, hang on, can you do this instead of this, or can we think about this? And this is maybe going way off on a tangent, but I was listening to a podcast the other day, where they were saying we're only a few years, 3 or 4 years off being able to put on a VR, a virtual reality headset at our desks for land management, and being able to walk digitally through the landscape with the landowner remotely. And you could actually, we're here with 2D maps looking at the screen. There's only so much investment and viewership we can have over the land, but at a point where you can actually get inside the technology and draw with your finger on the screen when you're in this VR and say, I'd like a hedgerow there, and then visualize that hedgerow in the actual landscape, I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating decade for land management.
I guess with the app, will that come with the phone app slightly, in the sense that you often see? Because I think that's maybe another thing actually, which you do raise, is the ability to be in the field and maybe identifying features. Because admittedly, when you're sort of on the website page on the phone, it's understandably it's difficult to access. But if there's an app, and admittedly, I think with the photos, which are a wonderful feature, the geo-referencing, I think, and sometimes, is that a requirement for adding photos, that it has to have a geo?
It is at the moment, but and very kindly you've alluded to giving us a bit of a promo on our mobile app, which will be coming out in a couple of months, which I'm very, very excited about. And you will be able to, it's your kind of your mobile companion to the land app once you're out in the field. So what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to look at a hedge row or look at a tree. You'll be able to take a photo, and you'll be able to directly upload that from the field, regardless of Wi-Fi or data. You'll be able to upload that to your land app web app.
Oh, nice. Okay.
For people to see.
Yeah, because I think with georeferencing, it's sometimes, particularly when you're working in low signal areas, you can end up down the lane a little bit, which isn't a problem because you can kind of judge where you are, but sometimes the photos don't load. So that's great to hear that.
No, yeah, but I think we're still a couple of years off full scale VAR, VR on the platform. So, but we'll get there eventually. But
sounds similar to My House Made Perfect, or whatever that show is. It'll be My Farm Made Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be very exciting, and Tristan, it's a nice space that you've come into. Hopefully, you'll help us get to complete 3D. VR over the next 2 years, no pressure. So I think I'm putting off Harrison, us trying to work remotely, collaborate on a project together. Just hope the technology holds out. Never know with these kind of things. So if I could ask you to come into the land app map, and just let us know when you've joined the map and you're on.
Yep, I'm on.
Obviously, people won't be able to see your screen; they can just see my screen. But you can see, yeah, you've just drawn. I haven't touched the screen now, and we can see that red polygon that you've just drawn on the map there. Can I ask you to do a few things, and then if you could implement them,
Sure.
that would be great. So the first thing would be, and just for everyone's information, you'll notice that since Harrison has taken over control and is logged into my map, I can tell because a lot of my optionality on the platform have grayed out. So that's how I know that that Harrison is currently editing the map. And then as soon as he stops, I can also take over and do my bits. So Harrison, if it's okay, could you create a countryside stewardship project?
Sure.
And just label that down in the project zone there. And probably also worth saying, you know, if you don't see an instant result on the land app, then all it usually takes is just one refresh to bring it up there. So just let me know when you've done that, Harrison. There you go, countryside stewardship demo, brilliant. So what you've done there is copied the land parcels across, the land covers across into a project and created the countryside stewardship. And now if you could just populate a couple of those parcels with countryside stewardship options, I'll leave it to the expert rather than trying to, the only one I really know is my lapwing plot.
I'll add some.
Perfect, yeah. So you can see that, you know, if you're working with clients or you're running a facilitation group, it's really easy to let someone that maybe knows a bit more about the land app, or someone wants to put input, you can work together and say, oh no, not that field, or you'll see is that the lapwing plot come in there?
Yes, I think so. The AB5,
yeah.
is it? Yeah.
Perfect.
I don't know whether RPA will accept it, but
no, it's perfect. And if you could give me a buffer around that lower field, just below the two yellow ones. Perfect. I can see that little buffer's come in there. And what have we got in that buffer?
It's just SW11.
Perfect.
Which will be the 4 to 6 meter grass margin on an arable field. So
we'll do two more things, and then we'll wrap up for a few questions. Number one is, could you put some labels? Can you put the codes, countryside stewardship codes on them, please? You've probably had more than enough time spent this year on doing countryside stewardship skills, so appreciate you doing a few more seconds here.
Enjoyable.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And finally, could you run a project report based on the countryside stewardship?
Will that appear on your screen? Or?
Well, there's only one way to find out.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah.
We'll see. So if you run one, and then I'll see if I can access that.
Okay.
I think I'll have to go into reports, but once it's done, just let me know.
Sure. I think that's generated on there.
So now if I come into reports, there you go. So I can see countryside stewardship demo. I can see when it was created, when it was at last updated, and I can also see who it was created by. So wonderful. I can jot this down. I can see, for example, that those lapwings taking up 19% of my land area, 6.63 hectares. And if I also go into this table view here, I can also work out how much that's going to make. So I got 3.29 hectares at 566 per hectare, which totals out a value of 1,865. Brilliant, that really, isn't it? I mean, to be able to work like this is, yeah, it's fabulous. And the further we can kind of get down the collaboration route, you know, the smarter our land use decisions are going to be able to get, and the more quickly we're going to be able to focus on non-bureaucratic parts of filling out forms and drawing up projects. So any kind of final words before we go to Q&A? You know, Harrison, anyone out there that's kind of working with clients and landowners out there, any kind of final top tips for how to get people engaged and communicating on the software? Or
yeah, I think with certainly with engagement, I think we found that it's been very useful when you come to actually implement stewardship options, that you can actually, go beyond. I guess I can try and draw on the map, but just putting in, how wide you need that buffer, actually accommodating features of the land. So unlike, I guess, with the hard maps, the farm environmental records and the options maps with your application, you can actually provide quite a detailed instructions for implementing those options, which I think is just always helpful, if anything. And I think further down the line, I think as people become more aware of this electronic mapping and the use of it, they'll have the capacity to do it themselves. So I think it really does help reduce the reliance on advisors and things like that, which seems sort of counterintuitive maybe from our perspective, but I think it really is necessary, and just gives people the confidence to sort of engage with schemes in the first place. But yeah, I think it will take time, certainly, for people to use it more frequently. But yeah, I think as long as there's some support there, it will happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's brilliant, Harrison, and thank you very much for giving up your time today. I'm sure everyone appreciates your perspective, and you enabled this webinar to be a bit more lively rather than just me kind of talking. So very grateful to that. A few final things before we go to Q&A, just to make you aware of. We talked very briefly on security and data. If there's anything else you'd like to know, you'd like to read our kind of guidance on that, then we do have our privacy policy, terms of use, etc., on our website right at the bottom, that you can come on and look and work out. So feel free to get comfortable with that, share that with your clients. The other thing is we're running a few more webinars. So just in our community zone, hopefully over the next couple of weeks as well, Tristan and I will be regularly updating some of our blog series. We're doing a blog series on triple SIs and the importance of triple SIs at the moment. We'll be doing a blog series on Tim's Norney Farm, as he's kind of using the land app to take Norney Farm to the next level. And also Think Today, Tristan's done an excellent one-pager coffee break blog on his first week in the land sector, and how he's found that and what he's learned, and kind of bringing a fresh enthusiasm in. Recommend you'll go and have a read. That'll be out at the end of today. We also have some more webinars if you're interested, if you've enjoyed this one. So we are in 2 weeks' time, so 2 Fridays' time, we're having a big product update on the land app, so lots of new stuff coming. This is the penultimate update before we do release the mobile app, so stay tuned for that. For any of you here that aren't too familiar with the land app, we've also got a bit of a back to basics webinar at the end of a month's time, which is just going to be 1 hour, kind of taking people through the platform really slowly, taking questions. And we've also got a training webinar as well for farmers and land agents. I'm counting on you to see you there, Harrison. I'm sure you'll be signing up to that one. I think from me, that's everything. I'm going to be sticking around just for 5-10 minutes after this. Just make sure if anyone had any kind of more specific questions, if someone's working on a project, they'd like to jump on the call and just kind of talk through it, that's fine. But have a lovely weekend, everyone. Tristan, Harrison, thank you very much for coming on today.